Pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, welcome everybody. Okay, roll call.
Dave Brown's
Here.
Anna Berger here. Amber Valley here. Molly McGee here. Dan Hussey
Here. 3.0, the action items. 3.1, approval of the agenda.
I make a motion that we approve the agenda without the open enrollments.
I second that.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
3.2, consent agenda. Questions on it? Consent approval? Or a motion?
I think so.
I make a motion that we approve the consent agenda.
I second that.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
3.3, old business. 3.1, facilities.
Just a couple of updates on some facility things. Monday of this week, and I believe Tuesday as well, the communication system installation folks were at Silver Hills trying to wrap up some of the things they were dealing with, some volume knob issues and just some of the components. Mrs. Miller, do you know if they're done?
I believe they are finished.
Okay. And they thought they'd be done this week, and then in the next step, and I think the final step, will be the on-site training so that everybody knows how that whole thing works, and we're up and running. The only other one I had, old business, just that update on Sather Field, if you didn't see, we're winterized and hopefully blown out to the point where when we turn the water back on, we don't have any geysers anywhere, so.
Other than the ones that are already there.
Right.
Okay, we have that on here to replace that.
Yep.
Any questions on facilities? 3.3.2, M13 filter installation.
So we got the primary purchase of the upgraded filters for the two schools, and Silver Hills is completely changed out. We are still waiting on the individual classroom filters for the junior senior high, but all of the rooftop filters have been switched. So we purchased 4 quarters worth, so 4 exchanges of the upgraded better filtration filters. So we made that purchase through some of our Idaho Rebounds money, and so we're good for a year on those, and we'll see if we get any feedback from staff or students, and I guess we can look at sick days and stuff and see if that's having an impact or not, but there's a considerable difference comparing them, so hopefully they trap more bugs.
Anything else?
That's it for now.
3.3.3, the wish list.
There's a couple additions from the one that's in your board agenda, and I have one more from there. So we added a carpet, not a bid, but just a quote, and you'll see that range of $9,500 to $13,000. It just kind of depends on what we want to do down at Silver Hills. The primary areas that we're looking at, the 2 kindergarten rooms, the carpet looks like a pond that you've thrown a rock into with all of the waves, and the carpet is just kind of detached from the backing, and it's nice and ripply. So we're looking at those 2 rooms. Both of those spaces have a section of the room that's either tile or concrete floor that's painted, and we have been in conversation with the teachers to see if we want to go wall to wall and get rid of the carpet part. It's kind of a pain in that there's a metal, the transition doesn't stick down very well because it's on the concrete floor, and then the flooring itself, the concrete or the tile has to be treated differently in the summer with the waxing and the stripping than the carpet does. So anyway, so we're going to kind of look at that, and then the entryway carpet has got some places where the seams are fraying and corners and such, so that's what that includes. Just depends on what we choose to do in terms of a total package. I added the 72 passenger bus. Lath and I have been looking at our the fleet and where we are with years of depreciation, what's on the list, what's off. Kind of looked at the duration of time we get out of buses. So what he looked at was our last quote for the 72 passenger bus that we purchased. And so that 93,000 just reflects that purchase. It's a couple years old. So we didn't get anything updated for this year, but that'll just give you a ballpark idea of what a 72 passenger bus with the storage compartments underneath would cost. And it did not make the list, but I did want to add, Tony talked with a company that can do a bore from Marcy Heyman's building there, the old doctor's office. And instead of digging a ditch to lay a new water line, they can actually run a boring machine from there all the way to the concession stand. That way we don't have to bust up the asphalt or worry about the track or any of those things. And it was a phone quote. And of course, the guy said, of course, it's going to depend upon the site because we have to deal with the ditch and possibly some other things. But just a rough ballpark, 200 yards to replace our leaky water line down there would be $20,000. So that's a start. So I just wanted to kind of get that to see, once we know what our budget is, if we can squeeze any of those things in. If it was going to be 200,000, that of course would be quite a bit more of an issue of the entire budget. So anyway, and so if we look at adding that, we can have them come out and look at it and get us a little better number. But that was a lot better than what I figured. We'd be looking at 6 digits at least. So
We still might, he hasn't seen it.
true. So those are the things. So we're getting close to having the top items on the wish list, at least a ballpark number, so we know what they're going to be, and then we'll sit down and start looking at budgets and what we have and what we can do. Most of these things will have to be summertime projects because they're too disruptive or the weather prohibitive. So.
Asphalt replacement, where's that specifically?
So we.
Bad,
I'm sorry.
is there a bad area somewhere?
In that, so around the district office, the plow came down at some point and took a big slab about half as big as this table, right where you get the crown of the road going into our parking lot. That whole old section is broke up and rough. All the way down the side, it's kind of next to that access road that goes up to the Millard's house, has got, your tire tracks have now pushed it down to where it's all broken, and the behind we have nothing. So once you get to the doorway, from there back and around where the other 3 cars parked, it's just gravel and weeds.
Okay. Any questions on the list? 3.4, new business. 3.4.1, proposed COVID plan revision updates.
So it wasn't in your packet, but everybody had one. It's what you're looking at. It's pretty minimal of what we changed for this board meeting, and it's highlighted, and it deals exclusively with the CDC's and Panhandle's new guidance on the quarantine time. So the current one that we have posted and that the board has approved has got us on the 14-day duration. Now what their guidance is a 7 or 10-day, 10-day without a test. And if you get a specific type of test on the 5th day or later, and it comes back negative, then your quarantine time can be dropped to 7 days. So what we're recommending the board do, our recommendation would be that we just change from the 14-day regardless to a 7 or 10-day, depending upon the scenario of the test results. And again, this is in alignment with what the CDC and Panhandle Health both have on their websites and through conversations with them.
And that's with possible exposure you're talking about, not with actually being tested positive?
Right. So if you're exposed and you don't get a test, then it's 10 days. If you're exposed and you get a test on the 5th day and it comes back negative, then you could come back on the 7th day. Well, after 7 days. So you'd come back on the 8th day.
You need a motion?
I would appreciate just a motion to update our current plan.
Make a motion that we update our COVID plan to instead of 14 days quarantine to 7 to 10 days quarantine, depending upon test or no test. Is that enough to?
I'll second that.
Any more discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Before we move on, I just want, on the same note, our committee did meet again last week to kind of look at transitioning after Christmas break into the second semester. We're going to come back together that first week after Christmas break to look at the whole span of time from Thanksgiving. So that'll give us the full 2 weeks after, just to see what our numbers look like then and the start of what numbers look like through Christmas. And one of the things that we discussed was the difference in what we're seeing with our school data compared to the county data and the public data, and the significant difference. So what we're finding is that any conversations that we lead to of possibly coming back more than what we're doing right now, alternating days, based on our current metric, it's very difficult, and it's going to continue to be difficult as long as the numbers are where they're at. But with our cohorting and the things that they've done within the schools, we're able to keep those numbers down, and even when we do have a positive case, we're not having to shut down whole schools because of the numbers. So we're going to come back, look at our numbers, and that would give us time then to do something similar for the January meeting and give you a proposed recommendation to any possible changes that we might have. So we'll look at that again in January.
Okay, 3.4.2, sick leave bank committee board appointments.
Policy 5421 has language in it that says that one of the members on the sick leave bank committee is appointed by the board. In the past, that person has been the superintendent, and I think just for official action, just to continue that on, we did have a request for sick leave bank use. I would make the recommendation that the board just make a formal action to appoint whomever they would wish. That would be something I'd definitely be willing to do and desire to do, and just be part of that committee if any more requests come along.
Unless any of you want to be on it.
Let's just keep it as is.
So can we get
I make a motion to appoint. But how is if we think committee board appointee?
I'll second it.
any more discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
3.4.3, board policy review.
So that's the bulk of your pile. I just want to thank B for organizing this thing so that it's somewhat manageable as we go through. So you have groups of policies, and I'll just give you kind of a snippet of what we did and why they're grouped the way they are, and we'll just kind of deal with each one somewhat separately. Minus one of the groups, all of these would be for a first read. So the first group that you look at is at 4.1.3.1. These policies came prior to the winter of 2019. The committee came together and we reviewed the stuff that's in the packet, and the committee's recommendation is that everything within that particular group at 4.1.3.1 are things that we would table, and we would keep those in that tabled category for future reference if we ever got in a situation. For example, one of the policies might deal with bus contracting services. Currently, we don't contract our busing services. We provide those ourselves. If down the future somebody came in and we wanted to look at the option of contracting our busing services, then we could pull that out of the tabled pile and state it within the active policy. But for now, everything within there, the
Does anybody have any questions on the table? 4.1.3.1s?
No.
You want to just get a motion before we move on, since it's,
we can, so we would
Want to
just,
do it just the table part?
then we can just be done with it.
I get a motion.
I make a motion that are you going to list these B's? I'm read them all.
Sure.
Table the listed policies for future reference.
That good?
Or do you want it to not?
As a first read, are we gonna have to come back though as a final read? Not in,
Not if we table, I don't think, do we? One
Okay.
just tabled them.
perfect.
Second on it?
Second that.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
And
The second group there is that the 4.1.3.2. Again, those are policies that were released prior to the winter 2019 release. What you're looking at there would be policies that we would recommend for adoption. The strikeouts would be things that would not be part of our adopted policy, and anything highlighted would be what you would see within the policy itself. So what you're looking at would be our recommendation for a first read.
any questions on those recommendations? Okay, that's first reading.
I make a motion that we approve policy 1420, 1640, 3390, 5320 F1, 5320 F2, and 5810 for first reading with the recommendations.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, 4.1.3.3.1. Those are bundled together. Those are cross-reference updates. So basically what you're looking at there would be anytime something in code changes, it's the very last page of the policy where it says cross-reference and legal reference. The highlighted things would be items that were updated. So the meat and the core of the policy did not change the verbiage. It's just that last little bit. So everything in there would be our recommendation that we adopt for a first read as just the cross-reference change.
Questions on age?
I make a motion that we approve the policies in 4.1.3.3.1 for a first reading.
I second that.
Any more discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
This is too good.
4.1.3.3.2.
Something's happening.
We have in that pile are the ones that are titled minor updates. So those would be things where there could be grammatical changes. A sentence might be either added or struck out. And you might also see some cross and legal reference changes, but they're not entire sections being dumped or added or brand new with policies we haven't seen before. So our recommendation would be that for a first read, based upon those minor changes.
Questions on these?
I make a motion that we accept the policies in 4.1.3.3.2 for a first reading.
A second, yeah.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, last one, 4.1.3.4, this is the C series. This is all dealing with COVID-related issues. There is I want to point out in policy 1700, there's specific language in there that states because of the pandemic and the declaration of an emergency, it does allow us to adopt these as a first read and not do a second read because of the timeliness of having those policies in place, not letting another month go by to allow those to sit for the second read. What I found going through these and what the committee looked at is there's a number of these policies that we already have in place. The C series policy has added verbiage specifically dealing with COVID-related issues. So it's just, they literally sometimes just put COVID-19 or declaration of an emergency into a policy we already had. So my recommendation and the committee's recommendation would be that we adopt these at the first read so that we can have them active. What we would do then, once the pandemic I don't know what'll happen to it, if it'll just go away, if there'll be some decree that we don't have these anymore, then we will keep these separate as a C series. And then we could just, as a board, just take action to table them with the other pile, or
Do we have a C-series or that's what we just called these? Okay.
Any questions?
I make a motion that we adopt the policies listed in 4.1.3.4 as a C-series for the first and final reading.
Second that.
Any more discussion? All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
I'm so happy I'm giddy. I want to thank the committee for doing this because you just saved the board hour and a half, 2 hours.
we do have another section of released ones that were the major updates that we'll be bringing after our next meeting in January. That was just too much to bite off in one night, so more to come.
Okay, 3.4.5, superintendent evaluations, you have those in your board packet.
I don't have it.
It's sitting on my desk.
I dug for it and then I thought we were just gonna get it, so I'm
No,
missing
I
mine.
had it, but it's sitting on my desk.
Well, we'll
Oh, no,
get
wait,
you
okay. Never mind. I'm just making
You
a
don't
copy
have
for
it,
you.
we'll get you one.
You can have mine.
Sticky here.
No, that's okay.
Let's, does anybody else need a copy?
I do.
So we're not. Here, Molly.
Thanks.
Okay,
These your
let's
go-to fast tabs.
try to get these to me. The next board meeting will be on Monday. Try to get it to me on the Wednesday before the next board meeting would be the deadline. I think is the deadline. You can drop them off at my house. You can take it to the superintendent's office. You can seal it if you want, and they'll give it to me. I'll go in and check. And then I'll have from Wednesday to Monday to tally them and put them all together so we can approve it or whatever, review it at next board meeting. So the Wednesday before will be the deadline to get that done. And if we don't have it by like Monday or Tuesday, we'll start harassing you.
No, so that's the 6th.
Any questions on that?
I'm gonna email it to you.
Oh,
Kidding.
that would be the worst thing you could do. Not turning it in would be better. Let's see. 3.4.6, hire a paraprofessional at Silver Hills Elementary.
In your packet, you have a recommendation letter from Mrs. Miller to fill a paraprofessional opening. The committee interviewed this individual who was in the Kellogg district and was looking to take a step up. So with that recommendation, we would ask that you consider hiring Stephanie Klein.
I don't either.
That's on 4 point, it's
Four
listed
I have the email on the other-
4.1.5.
Either.
It's listed as in your packet.
We didn't have Molly and I don't.
No, it's like physically not in my pack.
Yeah.
Well, we didn't want you to have it.
I'm sure.
I remember somebody saying, let's make sure Molly don't get it.
I just got one question on it. She mainly, she said her weakness is too sweet.
Oh, she was worried about working with the littlest kids.
A little cute one,
Yeah,
Oh,
they're
okay.
just so, she's used to working with middle school kids.
but maybe she thought she was too sweet.
No.
Any more questions on,
Sure. I make a motion that we accept the recommendation for Stephanie Klein to be a full-time paraprofessional for the chief.
The second that.
any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
3.4.7, basketball games and fans.
Well, like everything else, every time we make a decision, more information comes down the pipe, and then we have to go back and review our decision. So at your tables, when you came in, there were a couple more items to go along with 3.4.7. One is some correspondence from the ISBA, an Idaho State Board of Education, and then also a draft plan to the governor's order on gatherings for spectators. So what we're dealing with right now, under the modified stage 2, schools are exempt for educational purpose. When it comes to extracurricular activities, they are not. So with the governor's current group size maximum of 10, it puts us into some interesting issues trying to deal with basketball games and such. So there's been some things come down where I guess where we're at right now is we're functioning under the current guides of 10 total fans. Exempt from that would be anybody that is essential for the game, being the refs, scorekeepers, stats, film, people taking film. But other than that, we're able to allow just a total of 10 within our gyms. So we're going to finish that out until hopefully the plan that you received that says draft on it is signed by the governor, hopefully as early as tomorrow, where IHSAA and a few other groups have put together this plan to try to deal with a couple things. One is looking at allowing 2 fans per athlete, and also dealing with a team that travels together that is not actively participating in the game on the floor. So what's happening right now is if you send a JV and a varsity team together, that team that's not playing, if they sit in the stands, they count towards your 10. Most of the teams have more than 10, so you've already maxed out with just one team sitting there, let alone if you have a varsity team from both teams sitting. So you've already maxed out your group. So they're trying to address that issue. What we're doing currently is that the team that's not actively playing, they're sitting in the commons. Fortunately for us, we're able to stream the game so the athletes from St. Mary's this evening anyway can watch their other teammates playing on the floor. So for right now, I guess what our committee and our group is saying we're going to do is we're going to follow what the governor's order says and what IHSAA has us do. What we would ask is that you guys allow us to have a little bit of latitude on this, because things change in between meetings, and if changes for the better or changes for the worse happen, that's what we're going to follow. The other option would be that every time there's a change, we have a special meeting to address that change. I would say that from my standpoint and the administration's standpoint, we're going to follow the guidance from IHSAA and from the governor. If we were to ever say that we were going to go against that, then we would want to come back and get your approval before we did. So I don't know if we need there's really not necessarily an action at this point. I was hoping that there would be, and that's why this was in there on that item. So
Motion to accept whatever the governor and IHSA.
you could make, I guess we could make that motion as to give us the lenience to follow their ever-moving target that they keep throwing out.
As much as I'd like to say, just open it up and let the fans in, let all our parents in, like everything else, when the powers to be start making decisions and passing them down to us, sometimes they don't make sense to us. And the 10 fan rule makes absolutely no sense to me in a gym the size of what it is. But we've been given very specific instructions and consequences if we do not follow these guidelines. And so my recommendation as the board chairman is that we follow these guidelines if we like them or not, because the consequences of what could be brought down on us. It isn't what we want, it's what we're told we're going to do. And once you've been told something, if you don't do it, then they'll come down hard. So I think we should just follow the same recommendations that are given to us, if we like them or not. And they do change, and they're going to change next
Maybe
week.
by tomorrow.
Maybe by tomorrow. And I like the recommendation that we follow the guidelines that are sent to us by the Idaho Activity Association and the State Superintendent's Office and the governor on crowd size, which is I don't like it. But anybody else have any feelings or comments on it?
Friday of last week, they had a meeting with the governor and and I believe Ty Jones, they were about 2 seconds away from pulling the plug and canceling all winter sports because there were teams and activities going on in Region 5 and 6 where they were just opening the door and they had crowds of 50 plus. The way around that was the very specific language within that proposed plan from IHSAA with a number of things for, if you don't follow this, then there's the verbal reprimand, there's a fine, and then there's a loss of winter sports for your district. So they've got it down to 3 strikes, you're out, if the governor even approves that. So they've really changed their language in terms of how we proceed forward.
So can I get a motion that we follow the,
I make a motion that we follow the winter sport, the sports guidance given by the state of Idaho and the Idaho Activities Association.
I'll second it.
any more discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
4.0, information items, reports. 4.1, special education. Mrs. Karst isn't here. 4.1.2, Silver Hills, Mrs. Miller.
We had all of our regular monthly meetings and fire drills and all that. We were fortunate to still continue all the regular activities that we would normally do, just maybe in a different fashion. So the high school put on a really nice Veterans Day assembly, and our school was still able to participate virtually. So just being able to do those things still was really important to us, and we appreciate all of the work that was put into that. PTO has been doing a really great job of continuing their dinner and a book events virtually, or drive-through events. So they had pie and art night, and we had a food drive, and Mrs. Lund created a tutorial. It's a little advertisement is in your packet, based off of a book, and all of the classes got the book, and then they got a link to her tutorial to go through an art presentation, and all of the grades K through 6 participated in that. We had conferences, and they were all either on the telephone or some type of virtual format, and teachers were able to reach 85 to 100% of parents for those conferences. Any questions about that?
Everything going good down there?
Yeah, it's going really well. Santa's window shop just got done today, so kids still got to shop for presents for their families and in a safe way, so it was good.
Good,
Yeah.
good. 4.1.3, Mr. Lund.
Just a few things here. We had parent-teacher conferences, and there's a little table there. Just to take you through that. But for example, 7th grade, the teachers have requested 11 7th graders to come to parent-teacher conferences. 5 of those 11 showed up. But we had a total of 10 show up for that 7th grade conference. And you can just look at that table. Overall, it was about average for our parent-teacher conference for attendance, even the coronavirus, and we split it up to make sure we could keep the numbers low throughout the night. I have in the discussion part, I just wanted to talk to our push button unlock and open door system is going to be coming soon. We met with the company that's putting it in, and they're just waiting on a few parts to come in. So hopefully it'll be in sooner rather than later. And then third thing on the discussion point, I printed off our F's chart
Molly left.
for Q2, our current F's
I like my charts in this, but
in,
I kind of
in the
want to
school.
look at the A charts, but
I'm gonna take a look at yours again. I didn't bring it up. So the blue bar chart there is number of students with at least one F. quite concerned with our 8th grade, 10th grade. We have 30 students with at least one F, and then 10th grade, 27 students with at least one F. And then the red is students with multiple Fs. This is, I don't know, I'm sure all of you watch the news, and this is across the country. This is an issue that they're seeing. I went through Timberlake High School's accreditation this week, and they're going full time. And their principal said if they graduated today, they'd have a 43% graduation rate. It's awful. The grades are not where they need to be. Some things that we're doing, our RTI team, that's also my discussion point. We have our every other week, we have our RTI tracking document that shows at-risk factors. What we've done here in the last part of the quarter, we have built schedules for kids who are at risk, and they are coming in on their off days. So when they come in, they have a schedule that they hit with this little card that they take. They may go to one class for 2 or 3 periods to get extra help, and when the teacher can intervene, and then they'll move to the next class. They may have a failing grade. And we have about 20 kids currently that are doing that. We're still able to keep social distance, and parents seem pretty happy that we're trying something. We have our after-school study hall on Thursdays and Fridays from 2:50 to 4:30. We've been documenting people that are attending that. So we're making efforts.
You say you have about 20 kids. How many could come? I mean, how many are not coming that should?
On the list that we created, just from that document, we went to our highest at risk, the students that had multiple Fs, and then were at risk in other areas. We have those kids coming. So right now, I would say, I'd have to go back and look at it, I think it's 3 or 4 kids that are not coming from that. So, and then I think next board meeting, I'll show you this RTI tracker that Dave Ewers has built for Brooke and I both, and it's basically it's state of the art, and every school needs one, and he probably could be making millions of dollars off it if he wanted to. So we'll take a look at that. The next one, the next chart, we'll take a look at, and I won't make you go through all of them, but it already tells us what we know. You can take a look at this. This is from Q1. The red is attendance, and then on the that's on the left side, and on the right side is GPA. So just for 7th grade, here on the left-hand side, you can see the kid at the very bottom here on the left. He's got a 0.4 GPA, okay, in the blue there. And then his attendance, he's close to 14% missing. 14% of the first quarter he missed. So you can tell that if you show up to school here on the right, this kid at the very end's got a 4.0. He didn't miss a single day of school. And you can see the trend lines show that if you showed up to school, you're going to have a better GPA. And if you go through the entire packet, each of the trend lines prove that. So it shows what we already know, that if you show up to school, you're going to have better grades. And I think the reason I wanted to show you this is we have our attendance committee meetings coming up. I think this, when you can actually see the numbers in the chart, and you put that in front of a kid and the parent and say, your kid has missed 15% of first quarter, or 15% of the semester, or whatever that looks like. And this is your student's GPA. Look what could happen if you do show up to school. You can have better grades and a higher GPA overall. So just a kudos to Mr. Speck, Mr. Young, Mr. Voorhees, who helped me through Google Sheets create this, not through Excel, and we're still learning some of that. So it's not as powerful as Excel, but it's just nice that multiple people can work on inputting numbers at the same time. So any questions about that? And then that's it. Any questions?
What is the cumulative GPA, or are they just like the semester GPA?
This is Q1 GPA.
Anybody got any questions to either one of the principals? Thanks, you guys. 5.0, communication and information attendance.
You have just a snapshot of what attendance is looking like. This is a nice one in that we picked up a family that moved in, so they brought with them 3 new students, so that does help us out. We are currently still about 30 students lower than we were last year, which is potentially going to have some impact. But the state is also looking at the funding formula and where they get that funding formula from. So the conversation now is, instead of looking at our average daily attendance, looking at our enrollment, and at the meeting I was at today, their thought is that we will see very little change, because instead of us having to go off the actual students who are in their chairs, it would go off of enrollment. So that could be a good thing, because 30 students roughly would be 1 full-time equivalent, which would be basically saying that we're funded for 1 less teacher than we actually have, because we budget off of last year's numbers. So hopefully we continue to see some dropping in and our numbers continue to go up.
Any questions? 5.2, Title IX regulations.
In the middle of all of the other things that are new to education, there are new Title IX regulations, and I just provided you with that article just to give you an idea of how Title IX has changed back, when most of us, or some of us, were in school anyway. Title IX really focused on inequalities of participation of boys compared to what girls were doing, and that carried out for quite an amount of time. And now it's been added by the U.S. Department of Education that it also includes sexual harassment, and it is adding a significant burden to school districts, because within those regulations it requires that a district identify a coordinator, a decision maker, and investigators to deal with any cases of sexual harassment. And it's very descriptive in terms of the protocol, the timeline, and the procedure that a district has to follow. All of those people have to go through state required training, and then again following those procedures and protocols. If we were to have somebody who submitted a claim, then we have to address those based upon those things. The nice thing is that in our current policy manual, there are procedures that deal with grievances, and the Title IX grievance and that protocol is very similar to what they were requiring under Title IX. So in that sense, it's nice because the guidance is already there. They're still building and creating the Title IX policies to be released by ISBA, so that's that new. It just is one more thing in a small district. It's just another hat, fortunately, that Mrs. Miller and Mr. Lund and I and a couple other selected people get to wear, hopefully not very often, because these aren't things that we want to have to deal with. But if we do, we now have that guidance and some very strict things that we have to do to deal with those. So.
5.3, professional learning committees
I did want to just
or communities.
throw that in there. Professional learning communities is continues to be one of our main focal points in professional development. It really is the backbone of nearly everything that we do. Mr. Lund talking about the RTI team, that comes out of those professional learning communities, that collaborative nature and those efforts. We found out just within the last few weeks that all of our professional development that we usually attend in person has again been canceled. So our options again this year are virtual and remote. So we're looking at our options. We do have a group scheduled for the first bit of February. Instead of going down and seeing if the weather in Arizona is any warmer than it is here, they will be staying stuck in sunny Wallace, but they're still going to participate in the training. It'll just be virtual. So we're going to try to do some things so that they're not locked in a deep, dark closet somewhere, but the chances of them seeing 60 degrees is pretty slim. But we'll keep chugging down that road and using the framework of PLCs to help guide our growth and go from there.
Any questions? 5.4, explore. We have a thing from Mr. Hoffman. It's in the board packet. Anybody have any questions on that? Ms. Miller? Nothing? Okay. We have 5.5, Doug Marfus. How do you say it?
Marcus? Yep.
Document.
You may have seen that already. I think I shared that out when it was received. This was just, so Doug is our local legal representation. So I contacted him when Panhandle Health released their mask order just to see what impact it had on us. So you can see his response to a couple questions I had and his interpretation of some things. It was an interesting conversation. I think one of the striking things that he said is often those items that are written and sent down to school districts are often written by lawyers and then need a lawyer to interpret what they are. Well, not being a lawyer, thank goodness for him, he's great about getting back in a timely fashion and can kind of read between some of the verbiage that's in there. So feel free to take a look at that if you wish. That's something we've been using to help guide us with our planning committee and how we might look at the second semester.
5.6, 2019 census data.
Well, I think that the last item there, just a couple points. I did highlight the specifics that we need to look at, and that would be the state of Idaho as it's compared to the other states, and Shoshone County as it's compared to the other counties. This is significant for us because anything that we get funded through for federal program dollars tends to deal with census data. And you may or may not know, so we just completed the most current census. Of course, we don't use that data in the near future. We actually have to go back to, in this case, they'll use 2019 to help deal with budgets for 2021. So there's a little bit of lag time there. What the data is showing on the negative, on the unfortunate side is that Idaho as a whole is becoming less impoverished. So there's the percentage of people living in poverty in the entire state of Idaho is decreasing, but what that means for us is when the feds divide up their pool of money, they give it to the state, and then the state divvies that money out. Well, the pot of money that we're going to have to deal with in the state of Idaho is going to be less. And that's been a trend for probably the last 5 to 6 years is the pool of money that the state of Idaho gets is less and less. A couple times we saw a zero change, but other states got a higher number of people moving into their states. So even though our numbers may not have changed because other states' poverty rates went up, again, our piece of the pie got smaller. To help balance that, and I won't say this is a good thing or a bad thing, when you look at how Shoshone County compares to other counties, that data is a trend that has continued for quite some time. I would say probably from the early 80s anyway, and that is that our poverty rate as a percentage of other counties in the state of Idaho is significantly high. We're in the top 5 or 6 or 7 every single time that they do the census. So that helps negate money lost because we are in that higher range than when the state of Idaho divides up the money based upon a per pupil dollar amount. Because our percentage is higher, we tend to make up some of that difference. But so good and bad within that information, and we'll find out what the true dollars mean when we get our allotment notifications. But I don't foresee a huge change. It's usually within a few single digit percentages, so nothing significant.
Okay, we have no open enrollments, and unless somebody has any reason to go executive session, then can I get a motion?
Make a motion, we adjourn?
Second that?
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
I,
No, I screwed up. I should have just taken off executive session and not just opened enrollment, but I just looked down at the bottom one. I was like, oh. whoops. Failed. I'm at duties.
I knew what you meant.
Thanks.
These
You
were
want to take us
awesome.
offline?
I know.